Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? What's going on? It's your boy Sega Man back with another podcast. I want to interview my brother today, Slick Slayer. You know what I mean? We're going to talk about, his how he got into gaming. You know what I mean? And what he thinks about gaming from when he got into gaming till today. So I've been wanting to interview Slick Slayer. He's been on the Xbox Alpha podcast sometimes with me and Hebot. You know what I mean? But I first discovered Slick Slayer when he was on GRG with K Mega, and I was just really fascinated in his knowledge of gaming. You know what I mean? And him talking about the tech side of gaming. You know, what I mean, he's very very knowledgeable. And I want to welcome Slick Slayer here today on this gorgeous Friday. Hope everybody's going to enjoy the weekend.
Not as
Finally.
gorgeous as yesterday.
Oh man, yesterday was killing it, man. It was
Mm,
killing it. Today felt like straight July summer. You know what I
yes.
mean? But yeah, we're gonna chop it up, guys. And me, Silk Slayer, we're not gonna be here too long. You know what I mean? But I wanted to interview my brother. You know what I mean? Because he has a lot to bring to gaming, man. He's also with our brother 108's Dragon. He helps 108's Dragon with the Dragon's Den podcast. You know, you can always check those good brothers out Saturday, 7 p.m. It's a great podcast. He has awesome on there. He's another brother that I really admire. I like 108's Dragon. He's very knowledgeable. He's a big collector. You know what I'm saying? He's a true gamer. So I want to no further ado, I want to introduce my brother Silk Slayer. What's up, man? How you doing
Well,
today?
I'm doing good. Just came back from the job a little bit ago. Today was a nice, slow, uncomplicated day. It's just time it takes, and you got to wait for stuff to happen. But other than that, it's been a good day. Not as nice as yesterday, though, where work was easy and the weather was nice, and everybody was trying to get in and out. And I wish yesterday was like that. I mean, I wish today was
Man.
like that. But we could have did this a little earlier then.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you, Slick, man. I hear you. Well, Slick, just before we get into the gaming segment of knowing your background, brother, and childhood and growing up into gaming, man, like what kind of can you tell us what kind of work do you do, brother, if you don't mind?
Well, these days I do IT support for a local hotel nearby. I do a lot of IT support and also a lot of maintenance when it comes to like we have like big screen TVs and stuff
Yeah.
in all of the rooms, and we have a whole situation with the cable company where the TVs don't need cable boxes. The
Okay.
cable company around here, they have cable boxes, for everybody else, but for the hotels, it's built into the TVs. The TVs have the decoding, and there's a central box that we use that connects with them. And there's also a lot of technical stuff that goes on behind the scenes. As you know, technology is more and more pervasive, and even the simple act of watching TV is a lot more complicated than it used to be. You used to have just your rabbit ears and you get whatever you can over the air. Now it's this whole thing with MPEG compression and all types of wild stuff. We won't get into that, but it's basically the kids you used to know in the 80s who could figure out how to program a VCR.
Yes.
I was one of those.
I was one of those too.
Nowadays, yeah. So nowadays it's a little bit more complicated than that, let's just say. And then there's also we're redoing all the Wi-Fi here on the property at work. So there's a lot of we're changing a lot of the receivers and the transmitters and things like that to connect to the routers. And then we got other guys who are doing all types. It's a whole thing that's going on. So people can have their Wi-Fi without complaining. So that's what I do day in, day out.
Well, Slick, you know what? Real quick before we start, it ain't like the old days. I used to fix VCRs for older people. When they didn't understand why they weren't working anymore, I used to take them apart.
Mm-hmm.
I used to clean them. Clean the heads. Remember the heads in there? Used to
Yep,
clean
yep.
the heads of the VCR and make sure everything was good inside. Then they were ready to go again, man. So I did dibble and dabble a little bit into that. I'm not as far as you're into the tech and stuff, but when I was younger, man, I used to experiment with old stereo equipment. TVs and VCRs and stuff like that, and even sometimes DVDs, like learning how to clean the laser, the lens
Yeah,
on there and stuff like that. But not as much
just in the
much as
pot.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Not as much as you have, but that's really good to hear. It's good to hear a brother like you in the IT and technology and tech, man. Because as you know, technology is just keeps going like every second, man. I mean, it's always something new.
Yeah.
Soon we'll be implementing into. I'm not ready yet because I really can't afford it, brother. But I mean,
Mm.
people are going to be wanting those 8K TVs. You know what I mean?
Oh
So
yeah. Oh, One
you know
Away
what I mean?
Dragons has one, but there's not even a lot of content. But a lot of people who are getting them now, it's either because you want a screen size where it's just going to be 8K anyway, or well, it just happens to be an 8K and it wasn't really what you're looking for. The content isn't really there, but the screens are. Just like 4K was in the early days. You give it a couple more years, it'll be there. It'll be there.
And Slick, do you think like maybe in a couple more years, do you see actually the prices of 8K TVs coming down, or do you think it'll take just a little longer, maybe 2 to 4 years, maybe, or
Oh,
even
somewhere
longer?
within the 2 years at a minimum, maybe three. I don't think it'll take four. Just look at the history of what happened with 4K as a guide.
Yeah,
But even then, like 4K had less issues than the HD era. And I feel like the 8K era is gonna have less issues than the 4K era. But at the same time, they introduced their own issues. Like 4K introduced HDR, and now there's the whole thing with HDR, HDR plus, Dolby Vision, all these things. There's a lot of confusion when at first it seemed to be like it was a standard, and you followed this, and if your TV had that stamp of approval on it, you were good generally, because with that stamp of approval, it assured that certain other things were already set and were right. And AK doesn't have that now, but it's not something to really be worried about right now. There's really not anything in the way of content right now anyway. It's really because the technology in terms of the processing is there. And if you're
yeah,
using a screen that's not OLED or anything, or if you're getting a really large screen size, 8K just naturally is a thing. So even if you buy an 8K TV today, you would at least just hope it's HDMI 2.1. But other
yeah,
than that, like if you're buying a TV just because it's 8K, your money is better spent elsewhere on
yeah.
maybe a 4K that's better suited to what you want. But
So,
it'll get there in like 2 to 3, maybe 4 years at the most.
Bob, I'd say give or take, like you said, about 2 to 4 years, because as you know, our brother, 108 Dragons also has one, but I think he
That's right.
got one too. I think he has an 8K TV that
Yes,
his
yes,
kids
yes. He
bought
has
him
the
for
AKLG.
Christmas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's got
So
a
I, I
AKLG. Yep.
yeah. So what I'm gonna do, Slick, I'm gonna wait a while, a couple more years, after I
Hmm.
get my Series X, because I'm still on the hunt for that, brother. Hard, hard, hard on the hunt for it. You know what I mean? But as soon as I get that, and probably like a year or two later, I might see honestly about getting a 8K TV. I have a really good 4K Samsung TV. It's really good. You know what I
Mm,
mean? And I have that. I'm really loving it, the colors and everything, and when I'm playing on the One X, you know what I mean? And
yeah.
it's really good TV. But let's get into the nitty gritty here, man. I've been watching you for a while, Slick, man. I've been watching you. I watched you on GRG, man. I watched how you talked and about gaming, and your knowledge in gaming, man, is just very on point, brother. When I first discovered you on GRG, so what I wanted to know today, brother, Slick, how did you first get into gaming in your childhood, man? What made you or attracted you to actually get into video games?
Well, I don't know what attracted me to it. All, all I know is I can't put that into words. It's just like it's the first time anybody sees something that they're interested in, even today. You just fall in love with it. I mean, video games are supposed to be fun, and as a kid, you're seeing fun on the screen. You know what it is. You just know it's fun. It's something you want to do. And I think I gotta thank my cousin Mark. Uh,
Huh?
he had a 2600 and later a 5200. But my earliest memories had to be like age 2, because I remember being in the crib still. So maybe age 1 or 2. Okay. And I remember I had a toy and I was playing with, and I remember I was breaking it. I'd always take apart my toys. And that was the last time I was in the crib. The next day, my parents were like, "You can't be in the crib anymore." And the next day, I happened to be at my aunt and uncle's house because my parents were going on a trip or whatever. And my cousin has a 2600, and he's playing all the classics on there. He had all the great games on the 2600. This had to be 81, 82 or so.
Many games. Yeah.
Right. So Combat. He had the horrible Pac-Man. He had Miss Pac-Man. I think he had Pitfall. All the greats. River Raid. All the greats. I mean, I could name so many more games.
Space Invaders, brother.
Space Invaders was a great version for
Centipede.
The 2600 Centipede.
Yeah.
All the arcade classics that were on that system, he generally had. And eventually he had a 5200, but that came later. So shout out to Mark. Like he had the system, and even though I was a little kid, like 2, I don't even think I was 3 yet, he let me play it a little bit, like a good 20 minutes or whatever, and I was hooked instantly then. So about a year later, although I know for a fact the Commodore 64, right? My older brother.
Yes.
His name is also Mark. My dad is also Mark. My uncle, who's my cousin's father, is also named Mark. There's a lot of Marks in my family.
Kind of like George Foreman's family, huh, brother?
Kind of, yeah. So my brother Mark, who's also my godfather, right? So he bought a Commodore 64. I know for a fact it came out in 82. So I think he might have had it in 83, right? So around that point, my other brother, who's slightly younger than him, he would play it even more than my brother Mark would. So anytime he cut it on, it had an interference on the other TVs in the house. So like you remember, I was just talking about, back in the days, it was simple to watch TV. You just had the, you had the rabbit ears and you got whatever signal you can get, and that was that, right? Yeah. So the Commodore 64 would put some kind of interference on the TVs in the house, and it didn't prevent you from watching TV or anything, but it was like a interference pattern that was specific to the fact that the Commodore 64 was causing. I knew for a fact, as soon as he cut it on, it caused that interference, and I would run in the room and watch him play games, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So after a while, I asked my brother, "Can I play on it?" He's like, "I would, but you need to know how to read to use it. It's not like the Atari, you plug in a cartridge and you're good to go," even though the Commodore 64 had cartridges. And we had like 2 or 3. Most of the games were on disc, right? So you have to know how to read to be able to type in the command to launch the game, or at least to see a directory listing of what's on the disc, and then type in the command to launch the game and all that. So in about a month later, I knew how to read. Not just sufficiently enough to use a computer, like enough to read well enough where if I was to have taken a test at that point, I would have been on like the 5th grade reading level or something.
Yeah.
I was told this after the fact that apparently I took a test like a year later and I was reading at 6th grade level at that point. So, but that was only because he said to me, "I'd let you use it, but you can't because you don't know how to read." So I'm like, "Oh, really?" So I learned how to read. So now he's like, "Okay." And so, listen, man, we were talking about that 2600, that Commodore 64, up until after Zelda was out, which I'll reference later, like all the arcade classics of the time. If I didn't play it on the 2600, I played it on that Commodore 64. That computer it was the best selling single computer model ever, apparently still to this day, right? And so I played so many great games. I mean, any kind of classic from the 80s, it was on that system, and I had played it then.
Yeah.
Well into the life of the NES. So
very memorable system. The first Nintendo system. Very memorable system. A lot of great games there, man.
Mm-hmm. So I remember being in the 3rd grade, and I lived in Brooklyn at the time. So I went to PS 277. That's all the way at the end of Brooklyn when you take Northern Avenue all the way until you get to the water, right? And it was like a white neighborhood. And I'm just a black kid from Brooklyn and Flatbush, and and my family didn't have a lot of money or whatever. And so, I'm seeing all these kids there with fancier clothes than me, and then there was one kid was lending him, his friend, a cartridge, and I recognized it as a Nintendo cartridge, but this one was gold. I'm like, and the shiny gold catches my eye. I'm like, yo, what's that? And the other kid is like, you don't know nothing about this, man. You stay over there. And to me, it was two things. It's number one, I'm like, bro, I know more than you. I know that's a Nintendo game. Two, this part I didn't tell him, but I'm just like, you racist. Oh, because I'm black, I don't know what that is, or I can't get one or whatever. I'm like, I know that's a Nintendo game, and I've seen the commercial. That's probably Zelda if it's gold like that. You could fall back, because in my mind, I'm like, I'm playing this Commodore 64. I'm playing everything. My brother would get every game because he went to a high school where I don't know how he did it, except at the time, most of the games that people would have on these 8-bit computers were pirated. Like they would get a copy from somebody who actually bought the game, or maybe they went on a bulletin board and downloaded a game that was pre-cracked or anything. But the thing that I notice now, if you go on the internet and you try to download old computer games of the Commodore 64 or Atari computers or whatever, usually there's like an intro from the cracking group that hacked it or whatever, and they got their name and they got like a fancy intro, and they're showing off the graphical skills or whatever. None of the bootlegs that my brother had any of those, right? It was just the game. It would launch like it was the real thing. I don't know what kind of hookup he had, but his games had no crack intros, whatever. It would just launch the game like it was supposed to be. But most of the games were pirated, okay? A lot of people like that. Like they would say, don't copy that floppy.
Yeah.
Hey, he was copying all the floppy. I don't know how he did it. But the hookup site he got, even when you go on the internet today to find, a copy of this old computer game or that old computer game, they all have the little hack intros on there. And you have to search extra hard to find a version that doesn't have that in it. But all the games he had that. So fast forward to like a year later, I'm in the 4th grade. I went to a Catholic school at that point now, because that whole situation where I felt there was racism. I remember I told that to my parents. And they thought the same as me, that it was racism, whatever. And plus, there was this whole thing. It was misconstrued that the teacher was trying to tell my parents that I'm really intelligent and should have him tested and blah, blah, blah. And they thought, because of what I told them earlier, that it was a racism thing. And it really wasn't, right? So, anyway, so I went to a different school. And so there, it was a Catholic school. And apparently in First Communion, it's a 3rd grade thing. I was already in the 4th grade, so I had to be with the 3rd grade class in First Communion. But as always happens, you get a bunch of money, right? You get a bunch of money from all your family. So what did I do with it? I bought an NES, of course, right? So I played Super Mario Brothers till I was blue in the face, but still could never beat that game, because you remember it.
Yeah, that was a good game. Oh, yeah.
Level 8-1 would have that stupid jump with that one little brick in the middle and a huge gap. And you got to run, jump in that one little spot, and then jump. And I could never get it right till I was like 20, literally. Right?
Yeah.
And then I figured out, don't run, just walk, hit jump, you'll land right on it. And then you can jump on and continue. And then I was able to beat the game, because it was that one spot that held me up. And once in the blue moon, I could make that jump, except I couldn't, get to practice the rest of the level. Because I'm always hung up with that one jump. So it wasn't until age 20 I beat that. But anyway, so I'm playing Mario all the time. And my mom's like, okay, you've had this for a while. You've done well in school. I'm going to get you another game. So I'm like, yes, I want Super Mario 2. Right? And this was around the time when they were saying there was chip shortages of all this stuff. And it's hard to find cartridges. And so I went to Consumers to get the game. And they don't have it. But they did have Metal Gear. And I've been reading X-Men and stuff. And at the end of X-Men, you would see this ad, and it's 2 pages wide. And you see all the weapons in the game, all the items that you collect in the game. You get this body armor and guns and mines and grenades and grenade launchers, rocket launchers, and all these items that you find in the game. And it's all laid out in the ad. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this game. And that was the game that I bought. So Man, I played that game to death. I played
That's where
that
it
game to
started.
death. Yeah,
Metal Gear
that's
on
where
the,
it really.
the Nintendo the original Metal Gear, right on the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Right, but like your homie Ebot Hebot has been saying, that's not the original version. The original version was on the MSX. Okay, that was like the Japanese equivalent of the Commodore 64. Like that was the 8-bit computer in Japan that ruled all others. And Konami earned their place on that system even before the NES. So Castlevania and Metal Gear began on the MSX, not the Nintendo. A lot of people think it began on the Nintendo, like a lot of people think Final Fantasy began on PlayStation, because that's all they know. But it's the same thing like that. The MSX was just like it was the Commodore 64 of Japan. But yeah, I played that game to death. And eventually my older brothers, they moved out into their own apartment, and my older sister. And I'm sorry, just got a phone call there. And so basically, one day I went over to their house, and my older brother Carlo had bought a Sega Genesis, and he must have had it day one, right? Day one, because I know he got it in '89 when it was released.
Yeah.
And we lived in New York, and New York was one of the 2 or 3 places that they first launched it day one. Plus, I remember the box had it showed the Genesis and all the games you can buy on the back, but the picture of it, I noticed it was the Japanese cartridges that they showed in the picture, right? And then later boxes didn't have that, where they updated, so it was American cartridges in the box. So his system had to be first production run, because when you start a game, it didn't say the game is licensed by Sega or whatever. It would just say it would just launch the game, basically. It would just launch the game. So he had a first production run system, I know for a fact. And this brother, I'm telling you, he bought every hot game on that system. So on the weekends, I was at my brother's apartment all the time, playing every hot Genesis game. Every hot game that came out, I was playing.
That was the Sega Genesis, right? Did you play that? Was that your first Sega system that you ever played on? Was the Sega Genesis?
Hands-on, yes.
Okay,
I'd known about the Master System,
right?
But
yeah.
I didn't know anybody who had one. And the only reason I even knew about the Master System was because I'd seen it in the Sears catalog or whatever. But I never played it hands-on at that point. Not till many years later. So the Sega Genesis, yeah, was the first Sega system that I ever had touched at all. And like I said, my brother had every hot game that came out on that system. He got. Eventually, he had the Super Nintendo as well. But like every hot game, even Musha, which is like the Radiant Silver Gun of the Genesis. I knew and loved that game back when it was new. A lot of people are faking the fun. Excuse me, 1 second. I'm sorry about this, man.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody that's watching the podcast with me today. I'm interviewing my brother Slick Slayer. You know what I mean? We're doing just a short podcast. I just want to know some, Slick Slayer's background in gaming. You know what I mean? So that's what we're. Shout out to the 2 people that are watching, 3 people that are watching. Shout out to Lewis L. Thanks for joining us, brother. We're doing an interview with my brother Slick Slayer, talking about gaming. So
I'm sorry
thank you guys for joining us. So what were you saying, brother?
Okay, so yeah, like I said, Musha was a game that I loved when it was new, because I got to play it when it was brand new. A lot of people, like, they recognize the greatness of that game now, and it's risen up the price and all these things. But back then, and even now, that's still one of my top 3 favorite games of all time. But to rewind, Mario 3. How can I not mention that game? Because that's one of the 3 games
Mario
that
3 was an awesome game, brother.
Oh my God! So it was Mario 3, Musha, and then another game at the end of the life of the Genesis was Sonic 3, which my brother also bought. But that
was a nice showpiece.
Yes,
nice showpiece for
game.
Genesis. Yes,
right. But I also bought Sonic and Knuckles myself. So he had Sonic 3, I had Sonic and Knuckles. You know what that means? That lock on. You get the full real deal game that Sega had always planned to make. And thankfully, if you know the history, they were making a game that was too large to fit in the cartridge that they planned within the amount of time that they made.
Yes.
So they put out half the game as Sonic 3, and the other half was Sonic and Knuckles. And the reason they put the lock on to Sonic and Knuckles, because that's just the other half of Sonic 3. So when you put them together, it's the real game that they had always planned. They didn't just drop all that work they put in. They continued it and finished it, and then they put them together. And then they were like, hey, we could also add Sonic 2 to this. And they would have added Sonic 1, but there was a bug that they didn't figure out how to fix till later. So they didn't do that. But yeah, that was just crazy. And at the same time, my brother also had a TurboGrafx, but he sold it to my cousin Mark. And then he gave it to a cousin of mine. Yeah, the TurboGrafx was a great system as well. And especially, I'm a big shooter fan. Like I said, Musha, I'm a big shooter fan. And that's also because of my brother. Like, a lot of my interests.
Silk, do you still have Musha? Do you have Musha?
Well, we'll get into that story a little later. We'll get into that story a little later. It's very sad. It's very sad.
Okay.
Story.
Oh, okay. Okay. All
okay.
Right.
So, but a lot of my gaming interests were how can I say, they were shaped by my brother's interests. So the space shooters like Gradius, Musha, Thunder Force games.
Gradius, yes.
He played those. So now I played them too, but I love them as much as he does, even more so than he did back then. But it's really because of what he played. You know, I would see him play. I'm like, oh, I like what I'm seeing there. And then I start playing them, right?
Yeah.
And there's Gyres, all those hot games. And of course the Thunder Force series 2, 3, 4, and we had a lot of import games. Because importing games back then was a serious thing. On the Super Nintendo was simple. You just you break off those 2 tabs, and Japanese games fit no problem. You'd even need that little honeybee adapter or Game Gear or whatever. It just, you break off the tabs, the cartridges would fit, and we played a lot of arcade Japanese games. That either they would eventually be here in America or not. It didn't matter. We weren't waiting, and we weren't going to risk if it didn't come out in America if the game was hot enough, right? So there's lots of games like Super Leste, lots of stuff, right? And so I want to say 94, 95 when the PlayStation came out in Japan. Okay, I moved to Canarsie. I moved out of Flatbush to Canarsie, and this is how I met One-Away Dragons. There was a game shop that we would go to all the time, and I would see him there and a couple other friends that I have now. And this is how I got to know this person. Okay, this is one of my best friends for about 30 years, I would say, about 26 or 27 actually. But this is one of my best homies, as you guys all well know. We do the podcast every Saturday. And in fact, it's him who called me to interrupt me to tell me, oh, we have a surprise coming. You'll have to wait till May to find out what that's about. But he just informed me about that. But yeah, so I knew him ever since then. And my older brother had imported the PlayStation day one. So what a lot of people don't know is the PlayStation in Japan on launch had an S-Video jack. If you look at a launch era PlayStation 1, you'll see in the back of the system next to the RCA jacks, right? There's one area that's empty where it looks like there was supposed to be a connector there.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
The system came out in America, they'd already removed the S-Video jack, right? And my brother had just bought a new Sony TV that had S-Video, right? So the whole time he's looking for a way to play American games on his Japanese system because he wanted the picture quality to be better, right? Yeah. So not too long after that, like the mod chips were out. But the only thing we really cared about with the mod chips was to be able to play imports on your system. So if you have a Japanese system, you can play American games or vice versa. Most everybody else remembers the mod chips for being able to pirate games. We weren't concerned about that. We just wanted to play the imports, right? And particularly because his system had S-Video, we also wanted the best video quality. So we had to fight to find the mod chip, and we were playing imports. So that whole generation, I'm reading NeoGAF. Not NeoGAF, but Gaming Age, and I'm reading Game Fan magazine. I still have tons of Game Fan magazines right here next to me with the high quality paper. The magazines were $6 each when EGM and all, everything else was $5. Okay, it was high quality paper, and they were reviewing the games that EGM and everybody else were not. Okay, the hardcore games like Gunstar Heroes, and Musha was definitely there, and the Thunder Force games. And yeah, the Thunder Force games were reviewed on EGM and elsewhere, but they would review the Japanese version. They would get these games way before EGM and whatnot would even know about them. And we were already playing import games. So by the time everybody knew about a game was coming out to America, oh yeah, we've been playing them 6 months before that, like Contra 3. I played the Japanese version. I never really played the American version until I found out about emulation. So we're going to fast forward to that point in life where I found out about emulation in about 96 or 97. Actually, it was 96, right? But even before then, in the 16-bit era, you remember those like those console copiers where you would plug in the cartridge and it had a disk drive in it, right? To copy your games onto a floppy disk, and then you didn't need the cartridge to play the games. I thought to myself, hey, if you could download the contents of a cartridge onto a disk, and a lot of these import games, especially then, were definitely not coming to America. A lot of RPGs, action games, all types of games that were made in Japan and oftentimes would not come out to America. And I thought to myself, hey, if I could download what's on a cartridge onto a disc, why can't somebody who's familiar with Japanese, okay, take that program, hack out the Japanese, replace it with English, and basically translate the game? Well, eventually that happened, right? And emulation came about where they took those ROMs that were on these floppy disks, and people wrote programs that allowed you to run those games on your computer. And that took over my mind for years. And I got real deep into the community. I got to know a lot of people, like Dr. Sal Moria, who started Maine, Aaron Giles, who took over for him, right? Who eventually worked with Microsoft. And I suspect, this gets my suspicion, he's probably one of the top people who's responsible for the backwards compatibility that you see on the Xbox today. Because he was so knowledgeable about emulation. He wrote a lot of emulators. In fact, he wrote a PlayStation emulator. I forget the name, Virtual Game Station, right? It ran PlayStation 1 games on your computer. And all you needed was the disc, and you could use whatever controller you had, and it worked. He wrote this emulator himself, and Sony tried to sue the company he worked for, and eventually they kept losing in court. And so Sony just decided, to buy out the emulator from them to keep them from selling the emulator, because Sony kept losing in court, right? And that's how they stopped the emulator. But the knowledge was already out there. It spread out. And so gaming has always been a big thing. And then, you got the Xbox, the PlayStation, and even today, I'm 41 years old. I still play games. I just left work. I'm talking to you about my history games, and bro, it's nothing to me to talk about. This is something I've done all my life. I've loved all my life, and I've skipped out a lot of stories. But to answer your question about what happened with that Genesis, eventually my brother he gave me the Genesis with all the games, right? And I remember one day I came home from school. I sat there and I played it for like 3 hours. I had no homework or whatever. And I sat there, I played it for like 3 hours, and I shut it off. And I'm like, I'm not really going to play these too often anymore. I have emulators and stuff. I'm going to put these away, right? So I bagged them all up. I put them in the closet. Next time I get home, my father gave them away.
Wow.
Yeah, really? I'm like, why the hell did you do that? A lot of these going to be worth a lot of money one day. And he's not even here to know. But I can tell you, my brother had first production runs of a lot of major games, complete in box with books. So any major Sega Genesis game, I had complete in box. And Genesis games, had those hard shell boxes, so they kept everything pristine naturally anyway. I sat back and I calculated the numbers one day. That's $50,000 in games. And that was like 6 years ago I counted this. I bet you it's a lot more now, if not twice as much in value, right? And it's not about the value in cash. It's about that was a part of my history in those games, because I would go to my brother's house every weekend to go play games. These specific games, so it's a part of my history, and he gave them away, and it just drove me, and it still drives me nuts to this day. So, like, I talk about Musha, I don't have a cartridge. I've been looking, and I don't want to spend $200 for a Genesis game to some jackass who just wants it for the money and who just found it for the money, and he's just making a profit off of it. It's not about that for me. It's a game I love. I've spoken to the guy who wrote the music. He's on Twitter nowadays. I've spoken to the guy who wrote the music because he wrote a metal soundtrack to a Genesis game. And it's a Japanese dude who did it. And this was early on in the Sega Genesis. When you look at Musha, it did effects like zoom in and scaling and rotation with no extra chips.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like the third level where you're in the chasm and you're shooting enemies who's flying up from the chasm, right? So it's like zooming up at you. You shoot them, and as they crash down, right back into the ravine. Okay, they fly up, you shoot them, and they crash down with no extra chips, no slowdown, way faster than the Super Nintendo could ever have done. And it was just like, and it was an early game, and the soundtrack is ridiculous. And that's why I wanted the game again, and can't find it anywhere. But there's all these jackasses left and right who's selling it for like $250. They don't care about the game. They just care about, it's money to them. And it's just like, it's ridiculous. But fast forward to the day, it just continued on and on and on. I just played games, One Away Drive is a close friend of mine. I'd do anything for that dude. That's my homie since, man, I moved out of Flatbush. I've known him a long time. And so, yeah, and he's a gamer too, as you well know, of course. And this is how we connected over games. And so it's been a major part of my life, but the technology behind it, like the emulation, and I got to talk to a lot of people who's behind emulation, and it helped me to improve my knowledge about how the games worked, because I'm talking to these guys and I got to know about the hardware. It's like the processor that's in the Sega Genesis, right? The 68,000 by Motorola. That's in a lot of machines. It's in all the Capcom machines that ran Street Fighter. It's in the Neo Geo. It's in printers. It's in routers. It's in all types of things. That chip was a 16-bit chip of the era that did everything. The Neo Geo, the CPS-1, the CPS-2, lots of Konami games, lots of Sega arcade games. You look at Afterburner and Outrun. Okay, they all ran that processor. In fact, they ran 2 of those processors. Okay, that processor is in the Sega Genesis. It's the one that tells the sound chip what to do, right? And all that knowledge, it came from, all the work and the time I spent in emulation. I learned so many things from so many people, but I had the interest at the same time. It was just fun. It wasn't work to learn any of these things. Even to learn how to read to play games. It wasn't work. It was something I had to do something else that I really want to do, right? And so it wasn't work to me. I learned how to read within a month when I was 3 years old, just to be able to play video games, right? I've learned a lot about computers and technology because of that. I'm able to, to clothe and feed myself and earn a living because of that. So everything I am, I gotta say, has a lot to do with video games, because it put me in the position that I'm in today. And even the fact that I'm speaking to you right now is because of that. Because if my brother didn't buy that computer, or if my cousin didn't buy that Atari 2600, I'd be a very different person today. A very different person. I probably wouldn't even be into video games until much later in life, if at all. So when I look back at all of those things, it's like, hey, that's just the path I've walked all these years. And that's a condensed version of a major story I could tell, but I'm not going to get into all those details. But long story short, video games have been my life for a long time, and I couldn't see it any other way. I really couldn't.
I hear you, man. Well, Slick, I got a question for you, man. Now, when we were growing up, it seemed like gaming with Nintendo and Genesis. Yes, they were competition against each other,
Mhm.
but it was all in fun and games because that's what games is
Yes.
about, fun and games.
Right.
The
Mhm.
commercials, Genesis does what Nintendo don't,
Mhm.
different things like that. So let's fast forward now to this gen's era of gaming, even from the 360, from let's say from PlayStation 3 to 360 and on up. Now that
Mhm.
you see gaming today, and I want your honest opinion, Slick, your very honest opinion. What do you
Mm.
think about gaming today out here with the gaming journalists that are out here that spread toxicity, all the stuff that's just going on in gaming today that just doesn't seem fun to some people, and it might even turn people away from gaming. I think it actually made some people, with all the toxicity, get out of gaming. With PlayStation, fanboys always talking about Xbox and this is bad, and Microsoft is corporate slaves, and you guys are
Mm.
corporate slaves. So, what do you think about, honestly, what do you think about gaming today, man? The gaming community, like people that do like big podcasters that do like they always do, seems like I always do a lot of negative videos and podcasts on Xbox and things like that. So what do you think about the gaming of today, in your honest opinion, Slick? What do you think, man?
Okay, so I quite often reference the 16-bit era and Nintendo versus Sega, and the schoolyard arguments, and I was the perfect age for that at that time, right? And what I recognized back then is the
Yeah.
same thing that's happening now, plus the internet. A lot of people talk about social media, but I can tell you, even before there was social media, there was the PlayStation 2 fans and even the PlayStation 1, because the PlayStation 1 had competition from Sega, which was essentially no competition, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Sega
and then
Saturn.
you right, and then you had the PlayStation 2 where Sony really didn't have no competition. I'm not saying that Sony didn't do well and didn't have great games and what. I'm
Right.
not saying that.
Right. They
But
did.
people
I
grew up
owned them.
right, and I did too. But the people who grew up under that and knew nothing else before then, all they know is PlayStation. It's like the people from my generation who stuck with Nintendo and don't know nothing else and never tried any of the competing system and didn't want to hear about that. And all they know is Nintendo. And those people. They have a
Yeah.
Nintendo frame of mind. But those people aren't negative, right? If you notice, the PlayStation fans who don't know anything about PlayStation, these kids are negative. And it's because they have no respect, because they're talking their crap on the internet. See, I always talk about the schoolyard thing because that was face to face, right? I could rep for one system or another, but I still have to debate you face to face at
Right.
lunch or at recess or I'm waiting for the school bus or whenever the kids are talking amongst each other. And we were kids and you debate like kids, but eventually you wise up and you're like, you know what? Especially back then, you
Yeah.
couldn't have a Genesis without being jealous of the Super Nintendo or vice versa.
It's
Because
true.
no matter how hard you cap for one system, the other system had a bunch of stuff you wish was on your system, and you at least wanted to play them one way or another. So eventually, the consensus was you got to have both. Biggie said it: Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis. When I was
Yeah.
growing up, man, I couldn't picture this, but I could because of my brothers. But if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have been able to do it either. I would have only had the NES. I wouldn't have had a Genesis or a Super Nintendo back then because my parents couldn't have afforded that. Okay, and I was just a kid, right? And my parents were strict, so they wouldn't let me go get a paper route or anything like that to earn the money to do those things. My parents were Haitian, and I don't know if you know anything about Haitian parents. Very, very, very strict.
Oh
So I
yeah.
couldn't have been allowed to earn, the money to do that kind of stuff, like to go, shovel snow and earn a little bit of pocket money. And I have chores to do, but it doesn't earn me an allowance. I didn't have an allowance as a kid. I had chores to do because I have chores to do because they can't do everything because they're busy working,
That's right.
right? But I didn't earn an allowance from that, so I couldn't have earned anything, to put money together to get a new game system or another game. I
Yeah.
had to earn new games by doing well in school. And if I did poorly in school, not only did I not get a new game or whatever it is that I wanted, I got an ass beaten. Okay? These kids today have no respect because respect
They don't
wasn't
know what that is.
taught to
They
them.
don't know
They
what an
don't
ass
know
beating
the
is.
word. They don't know the word. People like to talk, and people of all ages too, who are in their 30s now, okay? In their 30s, mid 30s, okay? We're not that much younger than me. Still don't have respect, still don't know respect, don't give because they're hiding behind this internet. And some of these people say, listen, man, I am 6'4, 230 pounds.
Uh-huh.
Some of these folks who have said some of this foul stuff to me, I've seen what they look like, okay?
Yeah.
These are little twigs I could break just as easily, okay? And Runaway Dragons is an inch taller and 300 pounds.
That's a
You
big
go
boy,
mess with
man.
that. That's a big.
That's a big boy, man.
He's a big. Listen, I'm big enough. Don't come test me. Do
Yeah.
not disrespect me face to face. You want to do this on the internet? That's all well and good. Because I got the gift of gab to disrespect you. You will run to Twitter to try to get me blocked. Okay?
Yeah.
Because I can say some savage that will just embarrass you so hard you won't even think to run to Twitter. Let me tell you. Okay? Because I may not have been out in these streets because my parents were strict, but don't think I'm a sucker. Okay? I will curse you out so bad. It's not even, but we'll just leave that alone. But, these kids, like I said, have no respect. And so they think they can just say whatever it is they want, right? And just act a fool all the time. And they never get corrected on it.
Yeah.
And so they continually say the same things. They think they can get away with it. But even now, look at the past couple of weeks with these Sony fanboys, right?
It's
Sony-
ridiculous, man.
Sony has been screwing up, but okay, the most hardest core of these jokers on the internet, right? Who continually double, triple, quadruple down on this stuff that they're saying. Everybody else, okay, even people who thought PlayStation was winning and they were just going to deal with PlayStation and cared nothing about Xbox, right? And even the press, who just followed the money and would cast for PlayStation and not say anything about Xbox. But when Xbox would have something good happen to them, they would just downplay it or don't even reference it or just reference it lightly, right? Even they are changing their tune, right? But my point is, these kids grew up under an environment where they could say whatever they want on the internet with no one to question them, no one to take them to task or to clock them in the face when they get way out of pocket, right?
Yeah.
So they continue to do so. And even when they're absolutely losing and they know the writing is on the wall, still want to act like they're winning. And the only reason they're losing and why PlayStation is doing so bad comparatively right now, because they didn't hold the platform that they love to task. Like we on the Xbox side do. And a perfect example, Xbox Live, the day when they doubled the price, right?
Yeah.
The Xbox community as a whole came together and were like, no, this is not right. We don't want this. And here's why. We're educated as to why it's not a good thing and why what Sony isn't doing isn't a good thing and what they could do to improve their situation, because we're true gamers. We've been here. We've done that. When we were young, we discussed it amongst each other, right?
Yep.
We knew what
shared
we were
each other's
talking about.
consoles.
Right, we shared each other's consoles and games. You may not have been able to afford the competing consoles, but your friend had it. And even though you were arguing back and forth about which is better, and the only reason you did that is because that's the only one you could afford. So of course the one you bought is the shit, and anything else is shit, right? Or at least that's how you pretended.
Right.
But on the weekends, if I wasn't at my brother's house, I was at my friend's house. We were playing games, he brings his system over, I bring my system over, right? We bring the games that we're planning to play, right? And we do that until, I don't know, until we fell asleep. And all of a sudden, it's the next morning. Either we're still awake or we're waking up because the sun's waking us up. But we were playing games the whole time.
Remember those
that's
days.
what it was. Because that's what it was. These kids today don't have that. They don't have respect. They don't understand what they're saying and doing. But as you see now, it's all coming home to roost. All those chickens are coming home to roost. And that's the ironic thing and funny thing about it. The things they said are exactly the things that are blowing up in there. It's like they held the grenade too long, and now they've lost the hand because it's blown up in their hand. Right. Everything that they said, the exclusives, don't matter now, right?
Yeah.
And here's the funny thing about it with the whole situation with Game Pass, right? Okay, Game Pass is a thing that actually's showing its worth now, right? But here's the thing about it. They talk about exclusives. Now they can keep their exclusives because now we're getting your exclusives. Your first party exclusive that you pay to develop, we're still getting them on Game Pass. And you like to say for $1, you'd like to joke and disrespect us and keep saying, oh, we pay for Game Pass for $1. Well, that same dollar got us your exclusive, and you're paying $70 for it. We paid the $1. Okay, it's actually $15 a month for Game Pass Ultimate, but hey, let's keep the same energy as y'all want to say, right? We paid the $1 for it because a lot of us did. A lot of us, not me. Well, me to an extent, but a lot of us, we paid for as much Xbox Live as we could, before we paid that $1 to convert all those months over, right? So a lot of us paid for a lot of Xbox Live in advance and then paid that $1 to convert it to Game Pass Ultimate. So yeah, a lot of us are paying $1 to play your games, and it burns your ass extra hard because you talked all that shit. You have nowhere else to go but to double down on your shit or just shut the hell up, because you can't talk that crap now on Twitter or anywhere else in social media because everybody's looking at you guys like you guys are complete ass clowns. The press already done flipped on you now, as we know the press does. They'll say they'll be with whoever is winning in and of that moment. So apparently that's Xbox now, and there you have it, right? So so it just goes to show people, hey, you reap what you sow.
Hey, Slick,
and so
you remember in 2013, real quick, okay, when all that stuff went on about the Xbox One, the very first Xbox One, and the guys were on stage saying TV, 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 TV. Now they ran with that, okay? They did make a mistake by focusing more on TV, and we all understand that. True Xbox fans understand, yes, that was a mistake. We can rebound from this. But if you think about it, honestly, true facts, and I think everybody in the chat will agree with me and you. Back then, I wasn't going around. I was not going around on PlayStation eccentric channels being heard about what happened, calling them names or saying your mom this or that, or just saying anything about their system. I never went around anybody's shows ever taunting their show because at the time, yes, PlayStation had a one-up on Xbox with the pricing and everything else. And yes, it was the winner of last gen was the PlayStation 4. I can say that and not be mad about it or upset about it or anything, and that's fine. But that's not going to change me as an Xbox fan, and that's what people don't understand. I stuck with my console of choice, which was Xbox. I'm hats off to PlayStation because they had a great last gen. You know what I mean? They had a lot of great games that people enjoyed and things like that. And that's great. But I never went around doing what these PlayStation, what they call ponies, are doing today. Like going into people's comments. Right. Xbox has, if you think about it, right, from K Mega, from 100, from Lemon or Hebot, every time we would do a podcast, do videos, the one thing they would always keep saying over and over again is Xbox has no games. Xbox has no games. Xbox has no games.
Xbox has all the games on Game Pass.
Right. And if you think about it, and people don't understand, you'll be just like Next Gen used to say, and people used to say, you'll be surprised who listens to your podcast or who watches your videos. Phil Spencer and them, Aaron Greenberg and them, believe it or not, they listen to people like Dealer and other
Clearly, they were
people like
listening.
that,
Clearly, they
and
were listening to what
they
the
were
gaming
clearly
community was saying.
listening. That's
Yep.
right. And now, what's going on right now? Xbox has a ton of games. We have Game Pass, and that's their answer to everybody that wanted to go around and everybody's Xbox centric podcast. Xbox has no games. Xbox has
Yep.
no games. Xbox is dead. The 720p box. You have the less powerful console now. To this day, since the Xbox One X and Series X, who has the most powerful console right now? Microsoft.
Yep.
And there's nothing that they can say, Slick. They can't rebuttal. We have the
No, not
console.
at
We
all.
have the most powerful console. We got all these studios. We got
And it
Game
just goes to
Pass.
show that was all, every talking point they had has been addressed specifically.
Right.
No games. The power of the system. Every talking point they ever had has blown up in their face like a grenade that they held too long.
Right.
Every single one. Every
Right.
single one. And on top of that, it just goes to show what I alluded to earlier. Sony only ever wins, quote unquote, when their competition is failing. It's easy for them to do well last generation when their competition was screwing up. Not that they didn't play their part as well to take advantage of that and actually win, because had they just sat on their heads, they wouldn't have gotten that position to win anyway, right? Because they came off the PS3, right? And they seem to be in a similar situation once again now.
Right. Yeah.
So hats off to them. They did what they had to do to take advantage when their competition is weakened. But if you notice, every successful system they have ever had has gone up against lackluster competition. And the times when they lose is when their competition has been up to snuff. I'll give you the example. Let's break it down. The PS1, we already talked about that, right? The PS2, we already talked about that. The PSP. The PSP was expected to win over the DS before either one was even out. Everybody thought the PSP was going to win. Everybody thought that. I still have old EGMs where I can go back and read. In fact, I was reading one a month ago. Like, yeah. And so what I remembered was exactly what I thought. And it was exactly the fact. People thought the PSP would win. And guess what? The PSP lost against the DS. The DS is the best selling system ever. Not the PS2, the DS. It's like 150 something, and the PS
right, hands down
140 something. So it was close, but it just goes to show, right? And not that the PSP failed or whatever, because it almost sold as much as the PSP
DS,
or the 360, right? But
yeah,
there you go. The DS was more than double that, right? And it just goes to show. Sony fans don't get that, but that's not to say Sony didn't do what they had to win in those situations. Because even though the competition was whack, they still had to put in work and make games and do all these things. So yeah, they put in work, and I'm not trying to make excuses for why they won those generations and such like that. I'm not saying that, but it's not like they went up against real competition on top of that. But if you look at the original Xbox One, when they announced the DRM, if you look on Twitter, I'm pretty sure I tweeted this back then, but I didn't plan to buy an Xbox One because of the DRM plans, right? It wasn't until the day after when they reversed their decision. And if it wasn't for One Away Dragons TV, I wouldn't have had one on day one. It's because of him I was able to get one on day one. I had the money and everything, but because I already decided the day previous, I'm not getting one. Because of the DS, not the DS, because of the DRM stuff, it was already too late. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have had one day one, because they reversed their decision. They were listening to the gamers. They were, even back then when they were screwing up and they had the worst people in charge of Xbox, they were still listening then, right? And Sony clearly isn't listening now, because we keep hearing all this news about they plan to do this, they plan to do that, and it just goes to show they still haven't learned their lessons about the mistakes that they made and the mistakes that they're continuing to make. And we won't get into details about that, but it just goes to show, right?
Yeah.
But when you look at it, it's like, how could you not see these things if you just look at the history? If you don't learn your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And it looks like that's what's about to happen to Sony again.
Yeah. Yep. The PS3 days.
Yeah, it's PS3 days. But Xbox is in the same situation too. They have to learn,
Yeah.
like what they learned from with the 360. Don't get complacent, because one of the things that happened with Xbox 360, like late into that generation, they got complacent. This is where all the TV came from. Meanwhile, PlayStation had been humbled, right, with the PS3. So at the end of that generation, the longest generation since the 2600 itself, right? That was the longest generation ever in the modern times, right? That gave Sony enough time to barely sell more systems than the Xbox after they stopped production of the Xbox, but the PlayStation was still in production. Like
Yeah.
PlayStation fans like to say that they won the generation. Yeah, after Xbox already won and didn't care anymore, and they were being lazy with it now. Like
They got too
that's when
comfortable.
you won. Yeah, they got comfortable and didn't care anymore. Like, okay, that's when you came in and started competing again. Like that doesn't count. That doesn't count for anything. It's like the same thing that happened with Super Nintendo and Genesis. Sega moved on to the next generation, right? Even though at the point when it was like 50-50, right? But Nintendo kept selling the Super Nintendo and its games. And so when you look at the numbers, all said and done, the Super Nintendo outsold the Genesis. But the Genesis was dead by 95. They already had the Saturn and the 32X and stuff like that. They weren't focused on the Genesis like that. But Nintendo was still coming out with big games like Donkey Kong Country and Chrono Trigger, which is the third game in my top 3 favorite games. That third game is Chrono Trigger, right? And that came out in 95. But it just goes to show, like, you have to stay focused in this industry. No matter how hard you think you're winning or losing, it can be flipped over pretty quickly. Not that quickly. It takes a couple years, right, of work, but you could be back in a position of prominence or near loss.
Yeah.
Just that quickly. A lot of people just don't seem to understand that. But it takes time and experience to see that, and witness it and understand that.
And Slick, Phil Spencer, real quick, because we're gonna wrap up here soon.
Mm-hmm.
Real quick, Phil Spencer even said, people keep forgetting this. Okay, he even said when people were running with the power narrative and all that with the systems, even Phil said himself, "We will never." What's up, Rain G4? How you doing, my brother, my good brother? He said that we will never be beaten in the power narrative ever again, and people just ignored that. They ignored that. They didn't think he would. They didn't think he would say anything about. They didn't think he would go forward with that. You know what I mean? And look what happened when the One X first came out, and he said 6 teraflops of power. That's when people just,
everybody went.
They just
what?
Yeah. They were like, what? They don't even know what teraflops are. First of all, you know what I mean? But they went around. There was nothing they could say about that, because think about it. At that E3, it was crickets. After he came out and talked about that Xbox One X, it was crickets out there for a long time. And then they started up stuff again and started over again. Now that the Xbox Series X is out, they tried to damage control that a little bit, saying there were certain games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla might have ran better on the PlayStation 5 because they had the dev kits a lot longer, and it didn't have enough time for them to work with it and implement all that into the Series X. But now the tables are turning. They're turning now, and you don't hear anything anymore. You know what I mean? That's what happens when you push a sleeping giant like Microsoft, because believe me, they were listening. They were listening to all those podcasts. They probably don't. It's hard for them to listen because a lot of them had cuss and everything, but they listen to those podcasts, especially Aaron Greenberg. He knows all them guys, and he knows all about that. He takes what they say, he takes it into perspective. Now look, they don't understand. They did it to themselves by them taunting power, games, no studios, exclusives with them.
Every talking point. Everything they said they have directly addressed.
Right.
Every single thing. Developers, Japanese support, the prices of games, the fact that what you call the free-to-play games, they cost to play, Netflix and whatnot are held behind the paywall. They addressed every single narrative. Every single one. Okay, and the lies they would make up too about Xbox has no games. Now Xbox has all the games. Now they have your games that you pay to develop. Okay, and you're paying full price. We don't. We're playing your games now. Okay, and it's looking like not only that, Microsoft is not playing with the kid gloves anymore. Now
they're
they are
not.
going full bore, like
Gloves
in a
are
way
off.
they never did, even in the 360 era when they were winning, they
Yeah.
weren't going this hard. They are putting a level of attention and spending money and doing everything they can within their power is being done.
Yep.
They've got the hardware, they've got the
Satya Nadella
services,
said, "Do what you
they've got
got
the
to do."
leadership. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've got developers. They've got people who's out there listening to us fans. To tell leadership, this is what the fans are talking about. This is what the fans want. They communicate with us. Okay, when they make a mistake, they listen to us because we are quite verbal about what we feel is wrong with their strategy, and they adjust their strategy like they do with the whole Xbox Live thing. Okay, the first words out of their mouths from that public address about the reversal of their Xbox Live plans was, I forget exactly the words, but basically they're sorry, they heard what we said, and they messed up, and they understand why they're wrong, and this is what they're going to do to fix it. It wasn't just a bunch of excuses, and they're going to do this, and blah, blah, blah. No, they admitted they were wrong, and they understand, and they proved that they understand why they're wrong and what they need to do to fix it. And nobody even addresses that anymore because they're too busy winning left and right. Every day it's a new story that comes out, right? About about this game or that game, or this service, or this problem is being fixed, or this new developer, or this PlayStation fanboy has been talking to a developer and expecting the developer, to co-sign their garbage and bullshit. And they're not, and they're directly telling these PlayStation fanboys now, no, you're wrong. The truth is actually this, this, and this, right? All that stuff we were talking about, the developer kits. They actually said that now, that it was the developer kits that have issues. Okay, we heard about this in rumors. Okay, now they out and out say it. It's not a secret. And in a few weeks, they're supposed to have a whole presentation or whatever they're doing about development kits and their new upgraded. I'm not sure exactly what they're calling it, but what they're doing with DirectX Ultimate and their services for Xbox and they're upsampling and they're upscaling and all these features that the competition pretends like they have but don't have, right? And stuff that we don't even know about,
right?
That they're going to show us. Like this baseball thing was in the works for a long time and we didn't know, right?
Yeah.
But that's how hard these guys are working. I don't think Microsoft is ever going to really screw up to a degree like that ever again.
No, I don't think they
because
are.
They have people
I don't think
who are in charge, who understand what's going on, who are real gamers. Phil Spencer is the king. Okay, they have all these names for him. Philodominus, Maximus, blah, blah, blah. That's so awesome. But Rex is Latin for king because he wears the crown in this gaming industry right now. Everybody listens to Phil Spencer. If you love him or hate him, you hear what he says. Who cares about what Jim Ryan is saying? Everybody's clowning Jim Ryan. Doesn't matter what platform you rock, you're clowning Jim Ryan. If you're a PlayStation fanboy, you've been on Twitter and YouTube,
fired.
Right? And you're asking for him to be fired. I don't think he should be fired. Well, I don't think he should be fired. I actually don't think that at all. But these people have been saying and it just goes to show these people don't get it. They've been talking so much crap, right? And just us Xbox fans, we already knew they didn't know what they were talking about, right? Because we knew what we were talking about, and we could tell from a person who actually knows what is going on. When you see a person who doesn't know what's going on, but they pretend like they do, they pretend like you.
Oh yeah,
like these people are lying because you're the one who actually knows what's going on. You see the fake in them. You see the bullshit that they're saying, and you know why it's false. And sometimes when they make these little lies, they'll like leave out certain truths, right? Because they'll say something that's true, but they'll leave out certain details that will ruin the narrative that they're trying to present. And the fact that you know the real truth, you see exactly what they're trying to do. It's like the last one that I've heard is these PlayStation fanboys saying that Xbox hasn't had a real exclusive in like 400 something days. Like, what the F are you even counting? We have your games now. Are you kidding me? We have your games now. And you want to talk about we haven't had an exclusive in 400 or 600, whatever, random number that they're using now? Like, get the out of here with this, man. It's just the ridiculousness of it all. And it's like, these guys don't play games. What was that zombie game that they have that's not getting a sequel?
Left 4 Dead?
What?
Left 4 Dead?
No. It was a PlayStation exclusive, and the character was he has a motorcycle.
Is that called? That ain't that? I forgot the name of that. That ain't. Oh man, I forgot.
I forget the name too. But either way,
is it Death Stranding?
No, it's not Death Stranding. But they're not making a. I forget the name.
There you go. You just got it. It's called Days Gone. Days Gone.
Days Gone. Okay, Death Stranding is a good reason. It's a good thing you brought that up. Because they're not making a sequel to Death Stranding for the same reason that they're not making a sequel to Days Gone, because it didn't sell. All these PlayStation fanboys that are sitting and saying, "Oh, they bought these games," or they be playing games and buying games. We know they don't play games and buy games because they're on Twitter all day while we're playing games. And then the word comes out. They're not making a sequel to Days Gone. You know why? Nobody bought it. Nobody bought Death Stranding. Okay? All these games where they sit there and they talk about they have these games, they're not buying them either.
So they're not.
They're not. They're clearly not, because they're not making sequels. Yep. You know how this industry gets. And it's not just the games industry, it's the movie industry is the same way. If something is successful, that's the first thing they do is greenlight a sequel.
Yeah.
Right? And they know the pattern so much, they already know if a game is going to be successful before the first one is out, and they're already planning the sequel before the first one is out. It just goes to show, when I said before, every talking point they had has been utterly destroyed, and now they got this new fake one of how were they counting 400 days? Bro, we just got your game this week, and next week we're probably going to have another one of your games and your exclusive. And here's the funny thing about this whole exclusive thing on Game Pass, right? And this is the last thing I'm going to say on this.
Yeah.
Okay. You used to talk about all these exclusives, right? And that we don't have any exclusives because we have Game Pass and xCloud, and a lot of it, our exclusives are coming to PC. Okay, so that's where you're getting your number from, right? That's all well and good, but now we're getting your games, right, on Game Pass. And if we decide to buy a game, we pay $60, and if it was a Game Pass game, we're getting 20% off. So that's less than $50. We haven't paid less than $50 a game.
It's a win-win.
Since 2005, when the Xbox 360 came out and they increased the price of games to $60. That's how long ago it's been. It's been 16 years. Okay. Mm-hmm. If we buy a game that's on Game Pass, we get that 20% off. That brings it down to less than $50. Now we're buying games for less than $50. Forget $60. We're paying $50 for a game that we could buy outright. Even if, like, you buy Game Pass just to get that discount for the game because you want to buy the games, because some people don't like the idea of Game Pass and their Xbox gamers, like Noof Nukem. He likes to buy his games, right? Yeah. But I guarantee you he has a Game Pass subscription just because it makes his purchases cheaper. That's just economic. That just makes sense. So all these people are sitting here and talking all this talk.
I'm pretty sure he does.
Right?
Pretty sure he does.
Right.
Yeah.
So all these people are sitting here and talking this talk. Like, we're getting your games now on Game Pass. Your games. And we don't have to pay for them as much as you are. Like, what do you have left to say now? You don't have the power narrative. You don't have the games narrative. And this is the thing I want to say.
What's up, Fireboss?
Now what happens is we get your games right? While you pay for them, we get them on Game Pass. That's better than getting the exclusive because you get to pay for the game $70 before tax. Okay. And in New York, that's more than $75. That's like 76 and change. That's a lot of money for a game. We're getting your game for that $1. So that's better than exclusive because it's like we've got your game, but yeah, you can have it for full price. That's worse than if we just had the game exclusive. Because if we just had the game exclusive, that would suck to you and you would feel bad and you would feel one way or another if you're a fanboy like that. But the fact that you still have access to the game, meanwhile we're getting it for what you say is $1, that's even worse. And that makes me laugh every day I think about it. Because we're getting your quote unquote exclusives for $1. You can suck on that one.
Well, you know what, guys? My brother Slick Slayer, I caught him. You know, he just got off work. We started this podcast a little earlier. It's just wanted to interview my brother Slick Slayer. You know, asking him, you know, how he got into gaming. You know, his childhood experiences with gaming, and just chop it up a little bit here on the podcast Friday evening. And I want to just thank him for coming in. I want to thank all my good brothers coming in here, man. Shouts out to Vaca Fire Boss. You know, shouts out to Louis L. Always shouts out to Rain G4.
Rain G4.
I've been rocking out with him a long time when he was with our brother B Shadows. That shows you how much I've been rocking out with Rain G4. And you know, just everybody that came and rocked out with us today. I really appreciate it, man. I wanted to interview my brother Slick Slayer. You know, go check him out on the Dragon's Den podcast with our brother Lemons, 108 Dragons. Check them out 7 p.m. Saturdays. And we'll be back tomorrow, guys, with the Xbox Alpha podcast with Hebot. And if you know, Slick can make it and drop in and chop it up with us tomorrow, man, we'll be back with another podcast tomorrow. Probably around 2:00, man. You know, we'll see. You know, I mean, probably around 2:00. I want to thank everybody, the 4 people for watching, the true Xbox brothers that come in here and rock out with your man and your boy Sega Man, and special thanks to my guest Slick Slayer, man. Thank you for coming on, brother, and thank you for the knowledge, man, of gaming, brother. We really appreciate it. You out here in these Xbox streets, man. Much respect, brother. You know what I mean?
Ain't no thing, man. I don't try to keep the knowledge to myself, man. I like to spread the knowledge. You know what I'm saying?
I hear you. Yeah. And shouts out to Hebot. Go check out his channel, Toys in My Closet. We got next. Shouts out to Sega Forever. Shouts out to my brother E-Rock, the Don King of Xbox. Our podcast airs Sunday nights at 7. At 7 p.m. Sunday nights, the Exile podcast with my brothers on there. You know, Tuck, myself, Hebot, you know, Unlimited One Productions. Come and check us out, man. You guys have a good night. You know what I'm saying? Be careful out there, guys. Wear your mask, all right? Wear your mask. Be respectful to other people, you know, when you're out there, you know, doing your thing.
You don't want to piss out, because you definitely don't want to piss off a big man like myself or one-way dragons, man.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
Tolerate disrespect from people who are smaller than us.
I don't want to do that, man. So thanks again, Slick, and thanks everybody for working out with me, man. We'll see y'all later, man. Keep game. Hey, and it's our time now. Be happy. We got Game Pass. We got a lot of games coming. You know, we're going to be hearing some things from Phil about E3, different things that are going to be coming up, man. Be happy, man. If you're a true Xbox fan, it's time to be happy, man. Stop listening to all the bullshit out there, all the trolls and toxicity that's going on out there, because a lot of them are just ass hurt and the butt hurt. They don't want to respect. They don't want to admit to reality. They're in denial. So they don't want to admit what reality is. And that's that things are going good right now for Xbox. And I think going forward, it's just going to get better. All right.
Absolutely.
Peace and love. Xbox for life. We don't die. We multiply. Peace.